welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to take a look at every movie that I watched during the month of January. For the last 2 years, in 2022 and 2023, I watched a movie a day, and I'm looking to see if I can't do that again for a third straight year. And for a little bit of clarification, unfortunately, it's not every single day that I'm watching a movie. Maybe one year, that'll be my goal, is I can actually do literally every single day one movie. But for this year, or for the last 2 years, it's just been, by the end of the year, I get to 365 movies, right? And some days I watch no movies, some days I watch four movies, and so it all just kind of balances out. But for the month of January, I did watch 31 films, one for each day of the month. And so for today's video, we're just going to take a look at those movies. I want to, this year, especially going, doing this channel, I want to kind of find a way to document this journey of a movie every day. And so we're going to play around. I think maybe each video we're going to kind of play around with the format of how we're doing this. But for this video, for the first video of the month, we're going to do kind of the more simple. I think you've seen a lot of people on YouTube do this, especially when they're talking about their what they watched in a month, and that is on this website, which is the Tier Maker. Over here on the side, I've got 5 stars all the way down to a half star, and this is obviously my letterboxed what I rated them. And then down here we've got all of the movies in order. So without further ado, and to try and avoid this video going on forever, let's just run through each of these films. I'll kind of mention the name of the film, and then maybe a quick little snippet for each of them, and then I'll put them on the rank, or where I rated them. So up first we have Mean Girls, the original. So I watched Mean Girls probably 3 years ago or so at this point, and I remember thinking like, oh, it was an all right kind of fun little comedy. Something about the rewatching it this year where I realized like, oh, this is a classic. Like, this is, I see why so many people like, obviously why they love Mean Girls, right? So I agree. It's a classic film. There is a little bit, some of the dialogue and some of the language used in it maybe is a little bit outdated, but I thoroughly enjoyed Mean Girls. It's going all the way up to a 4 star. Up next we have Aquaman. So I was kind of watching a lot of movies when Aquaman came out, but I hadn't seen a lot of superhero movies to that point. So I missed the Aquaman craze when it was in theaters. I have since, kind of, I watched it obviously a couple years ago, and then I think maybe I've seen Aquaman 3 times now. This, I think, was the third time I watched it, and to me, it's a fine superhero movie. I don't love it. I know some people do, obviously, and it grossed over $1 billion, or I don't know how. It's like the second highest all-time film for Warner Brothers, I think. But we're gonna put it at or a 3 star rating. I didn't love it as much as others did. And I watched Aquaman in prep for the next film, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, I think. I'm just drawing a blank now. This is how almost forgettable this film was to me. It's going straight into the 2 stars. It just, I don't know. It was so, you could tell it's kind of the end here of the DCEU. It just kind of was coming down, and it just, this film, it was okay. There was things, it looked, at times it looked nice, at times it didn't look good, but ultimately it's nowhere near as good as the first one, and a lot of it is pretty forgettable. The next film is Rocket Man. And so Rocket Man, I think this is, again, probably my third or fourth time I've seen Rocket Man. I remember seeing it in the theaters, and I loved it. I was like familiar with Elton John's music, but I wasn't like a big fan. Since seeing Rocket Man, I've become like a really big Elton John fan. So Rocket Man, initially, I had it rated as a 4 star movie, and then on this last rewatch, it bumped up to a 4.5 for me. I truly, I loved Rocket Man. So we're putting that all the way up at 4.5. Next, we have Society of the Snow. A 2023 film that didn't really release wide until I think it was like January 2nd or 3rd or whenever it dropped on Netflix. Really, gripping intense movie. I really recommend. I would recommend you check it out, but chances are you've probably seen it. It's one of the highest viewed movies on Netflix of, like, I want to say all time, if I'm remembering. What the the article I saw talking about it. It's a lot of people have seen it. It's nominated for a pair of Oscars, including international film. So it's a really good film on Netflix. Go check it out. Up next, we have Good Grief. This one I'm going to put in 2.5 stars. Good Grief. It's Dan Levy, and it's this story about him his husband dies, and he's kind of going through a lot, and he's spending time with friends, and it's just one of those things where there's kind of this dramatic film where the drama didn't quite hit. I didn't feel as emotionally attached to the characters, and then there's just so much drama going on amongst all of the best friends, and the husband, and there's all of these different things that are happening in the film, and so it felt a little messy to me. It doesn't quite reach that level. Like, it's not a bad film by any stretch, but it's just, it didn't quite hit like the levels, or I didn't get attached the way that I was wanting to. Up next, we have Zodiac. The reason that I watched Zodiac was because I had a couple days to kill before, like, Oscar nominations were coming out, and so I wanted to go back and, like, rewatch some of the some films of, like, the people that are for sure going to win Oscars, or for sure were going to get nominated for Oscars. Go back and watch some of their previous performances that I hadn't seen before. So Zodiac went back to watch for Robert Downey Jr. and technically I guess Mark Ruffalo as well, but it was mostly to go see Robert Downey Jr. And I liked it. It's one, it's weird to say like it's one of my favorite Finchers, because like every David Fincher movie is at this point has been one of my favorite Fincher movies. Very few misses in the catalog, but I'm going a 4-star for Zodiac. And again, like I just mentioned with Rocketman, I initially gave it a 4-star, and then it has since gone up on my rankings. And so I think Zodiac is another one of those that I feel like on second and third watches, in the future, I could easily see myself like growing on me more and more, and turning around and really loving it. But for now, it's a 4-star, which for me, 4 stars are great movies. Those are really good. Up next, we have The Boys in the Boat, George Clooney's film from last year. Ultimately, it was, again, it's okay, but it's pretty forgettable. And for me, because I watch so many movies, maybe some films are a little bit more forgettable because there's just so much. But for the most part, I do a pretty good job of remembering a lot of the films that I see. And Boys in the Boat, like, it's a paint by numbers. It's very generic. It's very your sports drama film, and so ultimately it's kind of the same with Good Grief. It's not a bad film, but it didn't quite hit the heights. It didn't reach certain levels that I was wanting it to reach. So Boys in the Boat, we're putting it 2.5. Night Swim, the movie about a killer pool. Yeah, we're gonna put this in 1.5. It's not very good, but sometimes with these films that aren't necessarily good, sometimes that's fine, because you can have a film that's so bad that it's fun. And Night Swim, at times, it kind of reaches that level of kind of camp where it's so bad it's fun. But then there's other times where it just kind of is a slog. It's hard to get through. There's a couple characters or like moments that were done pretty well, but for the most part, Night Swim, not gonna make any of my top lists of this year. I think probably right now it's my least favorite film of the year. The next film on the list is Mean Girls 2. You're noticing a little bit of a trend here, kind of doing a little bit of prep work for a movie that was coming out. And so I had never seen Mean Girls 2. I don't think when I saw the original Mean Girls, however many years ago it was at this point, 3, 4, I don't think I knew that Mean Girls 2 existed. So when I found out that Mean Girls 2 existed, I assumed, because the end of the first movie, it kind of like they show you like those, like the freshmen or the sophomore girls that are like coming up, instead of talking about how they can be the new plastic. So I kind of assumed that's what this was going to be. It wasn't. It was pretty bad, and the main climax of the movie, or the argument throughout the movie, is decided randomly out of nowhere by a football game, which was pretty laughably bad. Mean Girls 2, 1 star. Up next, I had, because I went Night Swim, Mean Girls back to back. I'd seen a couple bad movies in a row. I needed some heat. I needed a good film to watch, so I watched Clue. I believe from 1985, I think is the year that came out. It's a five-star movie. It's one of those. I've noticed this a lot where there's certain movies that, um, depending on like it's almost like your childhood movies, right? Like this was just one of my family's movies. We watched this a lot growing up, as a family, and so it's kind of like the nostalgia for it. Like I look at this and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a five star because that's a movie of like my childhood. But it also just like rewatching it, it genuinely is just like a five-star movie. Like it's so good, it's so funny. I love Clue, so 5 stars there. Oh, mouse is going pretty wild. All right, up next we have Lift, Kevin Hart movie from this year, where they hijack a plane. I went in wanting to like really hate this. I just thought it was going to be so bad. And don't get me wrong, it's not great, but it is better than I thought it was going to be. So we're putting Lift in a 2 star. There's a couple performances and a couple moments of the film that actually work pretty well for me. Up next, the 13th movie that I watched this year was Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour. So I watched this obviously in theaters, opening weekend last year, and I watched it and I gave it 4.5 stars. And on my Letterboxd review, I said, that I was taking away a half star because she cut Cardigan from the movie, and I said that I would watch it, when rewatches, I eventually will give the four, give that half star back, and I was just, acting out. That was my way of acting out. So I rewatched it. There still is no Cardigan, and I take back what I said. I'm not giving the half star back. I'm leaving it in 4.5. Taking out Cardigan was such a just almost an unforgivable. It's, don't get me wrong, still great, still great concert film, but yeah, I you can't remove Cardigan from the movie and expect to get a 5 stars. So we're leaving it at 4.5. Up next, we have Self Reliance. This was a film I was when I had heard about the premise. I think it was like late last year, or maybe I'd already seen a trailer. No, I don't think I'd seen a trailer. I think maybe it was just like I'd heard the premise. I was really excited for it, and I thought it was like had the potential to be something really, really cool. But ultimately, for Self Reliance, for me, I think it falls into that category of it's a film where it had a really good premise, it had a really good shot at becoming something great, but then it just kind of didn't execute. Everything didn't, come together fully. The ending is kind of a little weak, and so I think they had a great premise, just not the perfect story to go with it. So I am putting Self Reliance in 3 stars. Up next is Ford v Ferrari. So I'd only seen Ford v Ferrari once back in 2019. I saw it once in theaters, and this I remember seeing it on a day where, um, I don't know if I don't know if this is nationwide, but a lot of theaters here do like the discount Tuesdays, so it's like $5 tickets on Tuesdays, and so I every now and then if I have a Tuesday off, I'll like pack it where it's like I'll see three or four, but kind of all in a row, and so I'm just bouncing from theater to theater, and so this day Ford v Ferrari was on there, and this is the first time rewatching it since 2019, and so I realized that I missed like the first like 10 minutes of this movie, which is kind of crazy. Um, but I didn't love Ford v Ferrari the first time I saw it. This rewatch, it's another one that's grown on me a lot. I'm gonna put Ford v Ferrari in a 4 star, and then I watched Ford v Ferrari in prep for the prequel Ferrari. So Ferrari, Michael Mann, Adam Driver. It wasn't one last year that I was like very excited for, and so when it came out, I didn't make like any great like push to go see it. Before the year ended, but I did get around to it this year, and it's okay. It's another one of those that's kind of a biopic that's almost a little forgettable. There's moments, kind of some of the CGI is not great. Penelope Cruz is fantastic. Adam Driver is really good too. But ultimately, it's just kind of a 3 star movie for me. And then up next we have The Book of Clarence. This was a film that I wasn't very, I had seen the trailer and I didn't know how good it was going to be, but I gave it I went in, was going to give it a shot because it's, oh, I'm drawing a blank on his name. James Samuel, I think, is the director's name. I had really liked The Harder They Fall when that came out a couple years ago, so I was like, I'm going to give him a chance. And obviously, I love Lakeith Stanfield, and honestly, this film was like way better than I thought it was going to be. James Samuel has cemented himself kind of as a director that I'm gonna see pretty much everything that he makes going forward. And Lakeith Stanfield, Obviously got the kind of that surprise Oscar nomination a couple years ago. Sooner than later, he's gonna get more nominations, and I will not be surprised when he wins an Oscar. Like, he is that good of an actor. Obviously, it's not gonna be for this, but you know, Lakeith Stanfield is one of the best actors, genuinely, that we have right now. He is so good, and so we're putting the Book of Clarence at a 3.5. Up next, we have Ted. So there's a couple films you're going to see here where I was kind of doing a little bit of homework. The Ted TV series came out. I still haven't gotten around to watching it, but I'd heard a lot of great buzz around it, and so I was like, one of these days I'll check it out. But kind of doing my due diligence, I went back to rewatch the movies. The first Ted, I remember really liking it as a kid. I guess a little bit younger when I saw it. I guess it's been over a decade. And so I really remember really liking it. On second watch, it's still good. It still kind of holds up a little bit. I'm putting it 3.5. It's not as amazing, I feel like, as I remember it being, but it's still okay. And then after when I was watching it, so I went from Ted and then I went to watch Ted 2, and then I realized I guess I never got around to seeing Ted 2 because I guess I thought I had, but it just not a lot of it sounded familiar. Amanda Seyfried is a fun addition, to the film, but ultimately it's kind of a little bit of a retread. It's really long for just kind of a raunchy R-rated comedy, and it's just kind of falls flat. A lot of the jokes don't land as well as the first one, but it's still okay. I'm going 2.5. And then the next film we've got here is La Mensità. So this is a film about uh, a young person that's going through gender dysmorphia, and Penelope Cruz, again another Penelope Cruz, excellent performance, plays the mother. And this is a film that I watched. If you guys on YouTube, if you guys follow Breakfast All Day, one of my favorite kind of review channels, Alonzo was recommending this. This was in his like top 10 of the year, and so I gave it a watch. And I don't love it as much as he did, but it's still really good, and I'm glad that I watched it. And so we're going La Mensità, a 3.5 stars. Up next, we have The Gentleman. So this is the other one that I was talking about. That there I saw that day. I think it was the day that I watched this. Was the day that I saw a trailer, or I don't even think I watched the trailer. I just saw that there was a trailer for The Gentleman. I think it's a TV series that's coming to Netflix. I think is who is making it. And so I saw that, and it just reminded me, like, I loved The Gentleman. Like, it was one of my like, genuinely. I think I guess it was The Gentleman. What was it? Was it a 2020 release, or was it a 2019? I think I think it was a 2020 release. It came out like in January, and so I can't remember if technically it was the year before or not. But I remember I just loved it. I don't think I'd seen any Guy Ritchie films before seeing The Gentleman, um, and so that was like my first experience. And just genuinely, I love The Gentleman. It's the way that it like the storytelling, and looking back at it, like seeing the cast now. Obviously, Matthew McConaughey, Charlie Hunnam, I think is his name, Colin Farrell, uh, Hugh Grant, Henry Golding. Like the cast is just beyond stacked. It's such a great cast. And I will say that I am still upset. The Toddlers should have been nominated for Best Original Song that year for Boxes of Bush. It's I just The Gentleman it's a fun time for me. I really love that film. Speaking of fun time and films that I really really love, Everything Everywhere All at Once. So right here is where you're going to notice every year, kind of the routine I'm in is the night before Oscar nominations are announced. I watched last year's Best Picture winner, and then go to bed and wake up excited for Oscar announcements. So that's why Everything Everywhere All at Once got another rewatch, and it's going all the way up into the S tier. I guess the 5 stars S tier, same thing here on Tiermaker. So it's going all the way up at the top. Up next, we've got Mean Girls, the musical for this year. So again, the third Mean Girls iteration to make to make my watch list of this year, or of January. So Mean Girls, it was a fun time. It wasn't like there's a lot of people, and I guess if you're more of a fan of the Broadway musical, you're going to have kind of a differing opinion, probably, and there's a lot of kind of criticism about some of the songs, and when I was watching it, I remember thinking like, oh, the songs aren't as catchy as or as like memorable as I thought they were going to be, but since then there's a couple of them, specifically, um, drawing a blank on drawing a blank on her name, not Gretchen, uh, Amanda Seyfried's character in the original. I'm totally drawing a blank on the character's name, but her song, the kind of the Halloween song, like that one is like so stuck in my head. And then there's a couple other songs here and there, as well as "It's Not My Fault" at the end. So there's a couple songs that are really memorable, and so I think that's kind of carries it a little bit and it makes it more fun of an experience. So I'm putting Mean Girls at 3.5 stars, and then up next we've got The Beekeeper. The Beekeeper to me feels like this year's Plane. Like if you remember the Gerard Butler film from last year, that I think it's kind of one of those that it comes out in January, people think it's going to be bad, and then it surprises people a little bit, and so it gets this like amazing word of mouth, and people are like so into it, and a lot of people talk about how great of a film it is. And then I watch it and I'm just like, yeah, it was better. Like it's not bad. It's not like some awful movie, but I don't get the hype that it's getting, like Plane did last year and The Beekeeper's getting this year. It's fine. I don't. For me, it's not reaching that same like the levels that it is for some people, but I'm putting it 2.5. And then right here is where I then started kind of doing I talk about from when Oscar nominations happen till the ceremony. I rewatch everything that's nominated for an Oscar, so you're gonna see that trend starting right now. Flaming Hot is the first one I watched. It was nominated for Best Original Song. It's 2.5. I think I liked it more on this second go around than I did last year when I watched it, but I mean, it's ultimately kind of cutesy, paint by numbers origin story of a flaming hot Cheeto, which I don't remember exactly. I remember there was a lot of discussion last year about there's some debate as to whether this is even the real story, so um, yeah, it's what it is. It's a 2.5 star movie for me. Then up next we've got Nimona. This is on Netflix, about if you're not too familiar, I'm not going to really spoil a whole ton about Nimona, but it's kind of this partner in crime. Chloe Grace Moretz's phenomenal voice acting in this, is and it's a very solid animated film. I'm putting it in 3.5. I know a lot of people really love it. Riz Ahmed also is very good as kind of the titular. It's kind of this futuristic, like it's set in this futuristic world, but like in the future, but then still kind of has the medieval times of like knights and kings and queens, and so it's kind of this cool blend, and it is really great world building, and it does kind of have some kind of emotional moments toward the end, but it didn't move me the way that I think it's moving a lot of people. So I'm gonna put it in 3.5. It's still a very good film, and I would recommend seeing it if you haven't. Up next, we've got Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Uh, Seems like the farewell to Indiana Jones, to at least Harrison Ford playing the character. Who knows if they're doing any sort of spin-offs in the future. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, I know, is a lot of point of contention for a lot of people when this film came out. I genuinely like her and her character a lot more than I think a lot of people do. But again, ultimately, it's pretty forgettable. I'm putting it in the 3-star category. Then up next, we have Elemental. So I saw this in theaters because Elemental obviously had kind of that crazy story last year of not being well, or not being seen a whole lot. I didn't do a lot of the box office. Not a lot of people were going to see it, and so that's when I was seeing it, when it didn't have as much of the word of mouth that it did, and I remember really loving it. And then I think it was just one of those films that I think the word of mouth on it was really good, and so it just got then from then on it got really really popular, and so I really like Elemental. It was one of it's up there. I don't think when I did my top 10, my top 10 films of the year, and I did like an honorable mention list, I think Elemental is like one of the first two or three that like kind of missed getting mentioned as an honorable mention. So I really liked it. So we're going 3.5 for Elemental, and then the two of the last three here, we've got the American sequels obviously not related, but we got American Symphony. John Batiste. This was nominated for Best Original Song at the Oscars. It's a kind of a biography, or that's not a biography, but it's a film looking at John Batiste and his wife, Suleika Jawad, and her kind of going through chemotherapy. And yeah, it's a really touching, really intimate, beautiful film. I really liked it. 4 stars. I recommend checking it out. It's on Netflix as well. And then we've got American Fiction. So the when the Best Picture films were announced, there was eight of the 10 that I had seen. It's American Fiction and Zone of Interest are the two that hadn't quite had a wide enough release to where I had an opportunity to see them. So finally, I think American Fiction last week kind of got a little bit wider of a release, so that's when I was able to see it. And then I think the Zone of Interest, actually starting today, is getting a wider release. So we'll be able to see those two. So yeah, caught American Fiction. I will see it. Hopefully, I'll see it another time before the Oscars. Like, kind of the week leading up to the Oscars is when I rewatch all the Best Picture nominees. But I really liked it. It's a 4-star movie for me on the first watch. Um, at times it was one of the funniest movies I'd seen, and then there's obviously a lot of kind of emotional, personal moments as well in the film. But yeah, I think this is another one that on a second rewatch it might go up, might crack into that 4.5 category. But for now, I'm leaving it at a 4-star movie. And then the last film we have down here is All of Us Strangers, uh, another film that a 2023 release that didn't get really a wide distribution, at least where I'm at, until this year. Finally was able to play a little bit of catch up and see it. And I really liked it. We're going 4 stars for All of Us Strangers. And so then this is the list. All right, and then let's zoom out here so where we can kind of see the whole big picture, where we can see all 31 films ranked. Luckily this month I didn't watch any half-star movies, and for me a half-star movie is a movie that's like so bad that it's like offensive. So luckily didn't see any half-star that bad of movies. But let's go through each of the categories and let's rank these. So obviously Mean Girls 2 is the only one in the 1 star. Night Swim's the only one in 1.5. For the 2 stars, I think I like that. I think I like Lift being there, and then I think I like Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom being there. For the 2.5s, this is where we're going to get some rearranging probably. Um, let's go with Boys on the Boat probably up front, and then maybe The Beekeeper. Is The Beekeeper, do I like it more or less than Good Girl? I probably like it more. And then Ted 2 Flaming Hot. That looks fine for me. And then the 3-star movies. Let's go with probably Aquaman goes up front, and then I'm guessing Ferrari. Yeah, I would go Ferrari, Self-Reliance, and then Indiana Jones would be the order there. 3.5-star movies. We're gonna put Elemental all the way up at the front. Book of Clarence probably goes pretty high up there. Interesting. We'll go Mean Girls. Nimona probably goes above Ted. So I think maybe that's the ranking. Elemental, Book of Clarence, Nimona, Ted, Mean Girls, and Lamensita. And then for the 4-star movies, okay, we're obviously going to have some big shakeups here. We're probably going to go Zodiac to the front of the 4 stars. Oh, it's not letting me for some reason. So we'll move Mean Girls. Probably goes to the back of the 4 stars. And then we'll move American Symphony back here, and then we'll do Ford v Ferrari can kind of come here, and then yeah, probably something like that. Probably Zodiac, American Fiction, All of Us Strangers, Society of the Snow, Ford v Ferrari, American Symphony, and then Mean Girls. And then the 4.5-star movies. I think that might be the right order. Rocketman, Taylor Swift, and then The Gentleman. And then for 5 stars, we're moving Everything Everywhere All at Once is going to go up front, like so. So there it is. Those were all 31 of the films that I watched in January of 2024, and this is how they rank. For me personally, you'll see kind of this distribution probably a lot, where there's a lot of films that like kind of I don't a lot of films aren't really bad. A lot of films kind of fall into the kind of these middle categories for me, and then it takes a lot for like for me a 5 star is just one of my all-time favorite movies, something that I love. 4.5 is like it's so close to perfection, but maybe there's a thing or two here and there, like Cardigan not being in there, that just makes me bump it down to a 4.5. And then for me, like a 3.5 is just a really good fun movie. A 4 is like a really good movie that maybe I just don't love as much, but on additional rewatches it might get a little bit better. But yeah, so this is where you kind of, for me, a lot of films. I think this is pretty close to like my curve on Letterboxd as well that you'll see. So yeah, so this was all of the films that I watched in 20 January of 2024 and the ranking of them. And again, I'm very fluid with my rankings, so I'm sure I'm looking back at this in like tomorrow I might kind of rearrange some of these, but for now I feel good about where this is all ranked. And so again, thank you for watching. I'm going to continue to kind of do these recap videos once a month, just kind of looking back at the previous month and recapping all of the movies I saw. I don't know if I'm always going to do it here on Tiermaker or if we're going to, try different formats, different ways of kind of like looking at the movies, but for now, for the first month, I thought this would be a fun way to do it. So again, thank you for watching, and if this is your first time, your first video of mine that you've seen, would like greatly appreciate it if you subscribed and kind of just stick around and see what we got coming up in the next couple of months. It's obviously this channel being kind of fairly new. I've got a lot of ideas for different kind of videos, but obviously right now this is kind of the one exception. But for the next, at least for the next month or so, we're going to be focusing a lot on Oscar related content. So if that's something that you're interested in and is just films in general and then Oscar related content, then again, yeah, subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And yeah, just stick around for the next little bit and see what we've got cooking up. So thank you for watching and have a great day.